You've been acting crazy ever since you got pregnant. Maybe you should focus on your health instead of playing detective. Marrying you was the worst mistake my son has ever made." She stood in the rain, 7 months pregnant, thrown out by the man she loved and the family she trusted. No home, no money, no one to call, just heartbreak and the sound of thunder. And then she saw it. A torn duffel bag under a bus bench full of cash. $5 million. She could have walked away. But that night, broken and bleeding, she made a choice. A choice that would change everything. From betrayal to survival, from humiliation to strength. Her husband married his mistress. Her mother-in-law begged for mercy. And the money that once destroyed her became her redemption. She lost everything, but she found something greater, herself. Sometimes the people who break you are the ones who set you free. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe this channel. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Because together, we are not just telling stories. We are keeping hope alive. The night was too quiet for a home that was supposed to be happy. Emily Parker stood by the window, one hand resting on her round belly, watching the rain fall across the city lights. The house behind her was spotless, every cushion in place, every frame shining under soft light. She had cleaned twice that day, even though her back hurt and her ankles were swollen. She couldn't sleep anymore. Not since Daniel had started coming home later and later. He had told her that work was crazy, that the company was on the edge of something big, but the distance in his voice told her something else. Love doesn't sound like that. Love doesn't sound tired when it says your name. Emily checked the clock. 10:42 p.m. The food she had cooked hours ago had gone cold on the table. She had made his favorite roast chicken with lemon and garlic. The kind he used to say made the whole house smell like home. She sat down for a while, rubbing her belly gently. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Daddy's just busy. He'll come home soon." But deep down, she didn't believe it. By 11 o'clock, she couldn't stand waiting anymore. She packed the food in a small container, grabbed her keys, and headed out into the night. She didn't bother with an umbrella. The rain soaked her hair, her coat, her shoes, but she didn't care. She only cared about one thing, seeing him, looking him in the eyes, and reminding him that she still existed. Daniel's office was downtown on the 15th floor of a glass building that looked like money. When she arrived, the lobby was half-lit. The night guard gave her a polite nod. He had seen her before. She went up quietly, her heart pounding. The elevator hummed like it knew a secret. When the doors opened, she saw his office lights still on. Through the glass wall, she spotted him sitting across from someone, a woman. At first, she thought it was just a coworker, but then she saw the way he looked at her, relaxed, amused, the way he never looked at Emily anymore. The woman Claire laughed and leaned forward, touching his hand, and Daniel didn't move away. The shock hit like cold water. Emily froze. Her throat closed, her stomach twisted. Her chest went hollow. She pressed her hand against her belly as if to steady herself. When Daniel finally noticed her, he didn't jump or panic. He just looked irritated, like she had interrupted something small, like an annoying call during dinner. "Emily!" His voice was flat. "What are you doing here?" She opened her mouth, but words wouldn't come out. The container in her hand felt heavy. She could barely whisper. "You didn't come home. I brought you dinner." Claire stood up awkwardly, pretending to organize papers that didn't exist. "I should go." she said quickly. But Daniel waved his hand. No, it's fine. He looked at Emily again, sighing like she was a child. This is embarrassing, Emily. You can't just show up here. I told you I'm working late. Emily felt something break inside her. Working? She said softly. You call this working? Claire's eyes darted away. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're overreacting, he said sharply. You've been acting crazy ever since you got pregnant. Maybe you should focus on your health instead of playing detective. Emily blinked back tears. I'm not crazy, she whispered. I just miss you. That's when he stood up, his tone colder. Don't do this here. She looked at him one last time, the man she thought she knew, then turned and walked away before she collapsed right there. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors opened, she didn't even notice the guard calling after her. The rain outside was harder now, slapping her face, soaking her hair. She walked home in silence, clutching her stomach, trying not to cry because she knew stress was bad for the baby. When she got home, Daniel still wasn't there. By morning, her eyes were swollen from crying. The chicken still sat on the table untouched. She heard a car pull up and for a second, hope sparked in her chest. But when the doorbell rang, it wasn't Daniel. It was Helen Parker, her mother-in-law, standing on the doorstep with 2 housemaids and an expression colder than rain. Helen looked her up and down, then said in a calm, cutting tone, Daniel isn't coming back tonight or tomorrow. Emily frowned. What do you mean? Helen stepped inside without asking. You've made things very difficult for him. All the crying, the jealousy. He needs peace, and you're not giving it to him. Emily's voice trembled. I just found out he's seeing someone. Shouldn't that matter? Helen gave a thin smile. Men make mistakes, but you were the mistake. You married above your place. Emily, my son tried to make it work, but love doesn't erase poor breeding. Emily's breath caught. I love him. I've done everything for him. Helen tilted her head slightly. Pity in her eyes. Or maybe disgust. Then you'll do one more thing. Leave. Pack your things and go back to wherever you came from. I have nowhere to go, Emily said, her voice cracking. I'm carrying his child. Please just... Helen raised a hand. Enough. Don't make a scene. We'll send your belongings later. Emily clutched her belly, shaking. Please, Mrs. Parker. I can't just... Helen's tone turned sharp. Daniel doesn't want this anymore. You can stay here and humiliate yourself, or you can leave with some dignity left. Tears blurred Emily's vision. Can I at least talk to him? He's already made his decision. Helen motioned to the maids who started gathering Emily's suitcase. Emily stood there speechless, powerless, watching her own life being packed away like trash. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. The rain had stopped, but puddles still shimmered under the morning sun. Helen stepped out last, smoothing her hair. You'll survive, dear. Women like you always do. Emily looked at her, her voice barely a whisper. What about Daniel? Helen smirked. He'll be fine. He always lands on his feet. The car door slammed and they were gone. For a long time, Emily just stood there at the gate, one hand on her stomach, the other wiping at tears that wouldn't stop. Hours passed. The mansion behind her went quiet like she had never lived there. She waited, thinking maybe Daniel would call, maybe he'd come after her. But when his car finally appeared down the road, hope lit her face. He slowed down as he approached, and she stepped forward, ready to wave, but he didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed straight ahead as he drove past the gate and disappeared into the city. The last thread inside her snapped. By afternoon, she was walking. No destination, no umbrella, no plan. The wind blew hard, making her coat stick to her skin. She passed bus stops, coffee shops, people staring at their phones. No one saw her. No one knew what had just happened to her world. When she reached her old neighborhood, she went straight to her parents' old apartment. But when she rang the bell, a young woman opened the door. "Sorry," the stranger said kindly. "The Parkers moved out years ago. I think they sold the place." Emily mumbled an apology and stepped back. Dazed. Her father was gone. Her mother had moved away after his death. She had no one left. She found a small park bench nearby and sat down. Her phone was almost dead, but she tried calling Daniel again. The line didn't ring, just an automated voice. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She tried Helen's number next. Straight to voicemail. That was when the first sob broke out of her chest. Not quiet, not polite, raw and ugly. She pressed her palm to her mouth as if she could swallow the sound, but it kept coming. People walking by turned their heads. Some looked sorry, others didn't care. After a while, the rain returned soft at first, then heavier. She didn't move. She sat there, soaked to the bone, one hand on her belly, whispering, "It's okay, baby. I'm here. I'll figure it out." But even her voice sounded hollow now. The street lights flickered on one by one. The world felt blurred, too wet, too quiet. She pulled her coat tighter and tried to think. She could go to a shelter maybe or call a friend from nursing school. But her mind was foggy, her body tired, and her heart just wanted to stop hurting. By the time night came, her feet were swollen and her hands numb from cold. She found a covered bus stop near the edge of town and sat down. No buses came anymore. The rain hit the roof above her, steady and merciless. She looked down at her belly again. "I promise I won't give up on you," she whispered. Her voice trembled, her eyes half closed. "Even if nobody wants us, I'll still try." Her body sagged from exhaustion. Her breathing slowed. The city lights blurred into silver streaks through the rain. Emily sat under the bus stop roof for what felt like forever. The sound of the rain was the only thing keeping her awake. She could hear it hitting the metal roof above her in slow, steady beats, almost like a lullaby, soft and cruel at the same time. Her hands were trembling, her clothes were soaked through, and the air felt colder by the minute. Every time she tried to close her eyes, she saw Daniel's face. Not the man she married, but the man he had become. Cold, proud, and unreachable. She remembered the way he used to kiss her forehead before work. The way he held her hand at the doctor's office when they first heard the baby's heartbeat. Those memories used to make her smile. Now they felt like lies that had been whispered into her ears until she forgot what truth sounded like. Her stomach tightened again, a dull ache that made her flinch. "It's okay," she whispered weakly, rubbing her belly. "Mommy's just tired. Don't worry, sweetheart. Mommy's not going to let anything happen to you." The rain didn't stop. It only grew heavier. The world around her blurred into gray. Passing cars, puddles reflecting headlights, people running by with umbrellas. None of them noticed the woman sitting there shivering and broken, her hand resting protectively over her unborn child. A car splashed a puddle near her feet. Mud and rainwater soaked her shoes, but she didn't even move. There was nowhere to go, no one to call. Her phone had finally died an hour ago. She leaned back against the cold glass of the bus stop, staring out at the wet street. "God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "If you can hear me, just give me one sign, something, anything, because I can't do this anymore." For a while, nothing happened, just rain and silence. Then she heard two women's voices approaching. Faint, laughing softly as they shared an umbrella. One of them said, "Did you see it? Daniel Parker finally got engaged to Claire." "About time, huh? She's gorgeous." The other replied. "Yeah, I saw it on Instagram." "His ex-wife, what's her name?" "Emily. Poor thing. Guess money always wins in the end." The words hit her like a slap. Her hands went cold. She sat perfectly still, listening as their voices faded into the distance, their laughter mixing with the rain. So, it was true. They were already engaged. He didn't even wait. He had thrown her out like trash and gone straight to the woman who ruined her home. Emily pressed her lips together, trying to hold back a sob, but it slipped out anyway. Quiet, broken, like a child crying in her sleep. She bent forward, wrapping her arms around her belly, rocking slightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the baby. "I'm so sorry. I should have known better." Her vision blurred again, but not just from tears. She felt dizzy, weak, the kind of tired that goes deeper than the body. A tired that lives in the soul. She rested her head against the cold metal pole beside her. Closing her eyes, the rain sounded softer now, almost distant. She didn't notice when the lightning flashed across the sky. Just a sudden burst of white light that made her flinch. Thunder rolled a second later, deep and slow. The wind picked up, blowing the rain sideways, splashing against her legs. That's when she saw it. At first, it was nothing, just a dark shape under the bench, half covered by a piece of wet cardboard. But when the next flash of lightning came, she caught the glint of something shiny. A zipper. She blinked, squinting through the rain. Her heart gave a small, uneven thump. "What is that?" she murmured to herself. She bent forward slowly, her joints stiff and her back aching. Her fingers brushed the edge of the object. Fabric, heavy, soaked. She pulled it closer and saw it was an old black duffel bag, the kind people use for gym clothes or weekend trips. It was heavier than it looked. For a second, she thought about leaving it alone. Maybe someone had dropped it. Maybe it was just junk. But then she remembered where she was. A quiet street, an empty bus stop, nobody around. She hesitated, glancing left and right. No one was there, only rain and the hum of faraway traffic. Her curiosity got the better of her. With shaky hands, she tugged at the zipper. It resisted at first, stuck from the wet fabric. She pulled harder, and it slid open with a low metallic sound. She peered inside. Her breath caught. Inside the bag were stacks of cash. Neat bundles of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. Not a few dozens, maybe hundreds. She stared, her eyes wide, her mind blank. For a moment, she thought she must be dreaming. She reached out and touched one bundle. The paper was real. The texture was real. She could smell the faint mix of leather and rain and money. Her heart started to pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. She looked around again, expecting someone to jump out, to yell, to say it was a mistake. But the street stayed empty. She quickly zipped the bag halfway closed and sat frozen, unsure what to do. Her thoughts spun in circles. Who could have left this here? Was it stolen? Was someone coming back for it? Then another thought crept in, quiet but dangerous. What if this was her answer? She looked down at her belly, her tears mixing with rainwater on her face. Is this what you meant?" she whispered. "Is this the sign?" A car passed by in the distance, its headlights slicing through the mist, then disappearing. Emily sat perfectly still, the bag resting beside her like a secret too big to understand. The rain softened again, turning into a gentle drizzle. She could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the tiny flutter of life inside her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Not completely. Slowly, she pulled the bag closer, pressing it to her chest as if afraid the night might take it back. She didn't know what it meant yet, or what she would do with it, or if it would save her or destroy her. All she knew was that for the first time in days, she didn't feel helpless. Rainwater ran down her cheeks, dripping from her chin. She couldn't tell if it was the storm or her own tears. And as another flash of lightning lit the empty street, Emily Parker sat under the bus stop, soaked, trembling, and staring at the duffel bag full of money that had just fallen into her life. Her breath came out in a whisper. "What now?" Then the thunder answered for her, low and distant, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell, so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments where are you watching from and how did the story speak to you. The rain had stopped by the time Emily found the courage to stand up. The world around her was still wet and quiet. The air heavy with the smell of asphalt and thunder. She looked down at the duffel bag in her hands. It didn't feel real. It felt like something from another life. One that didn't belong to her. Her fingers tightened on the handles as if afraid it would vanish if she let go. She glanced around once more, scanning the street. No cars, no voices, no one running after her. Just the sound of dripping water from a broken street light. She took a deep breath and started walking. She didn't know where she was going. She just walked until her legs felt like rubber. Her wet shoes made squishing sounds with every step. By the time she reached the edge of town, her body screamed for rest. That's when she saw a small motel with a flickering red sign. Vacancy. The front desk clerk barely looked up from his phone when she walked in. "One night?" he asked. Emily nodded. Her voice wouldn't come out. "That'll be $72. Her hand trembled as she reached into the bag, pulling out one stack of bills. She peeled off a single $100 note, her stomach twisting with guilt. It felt wrong, even though she hadn't done anything. The clerk took it without question and handed her a key. Room 9, end of the hall. The room was small. One bed, one flickering lamp, curtains that didn't quite close. The air smelled faintly of smoke and lemon cleaner. Emily dropped the bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it. She didn't move for a long time. The sound of rain dripping from the roof became a clock she couldn't stop hearing. Every second that passed felt heavier. Eventually, she unzipped the bag again. The sight still made her chest tighten. She ran her fingers over the crisp paper bands, whispering, "This can't be real." Her conscience and her fear started to argue in her head. Yours. But what if it's no one's anymore? What if someone left it behind? It could belong to criminals. Or maybe it's a miracle. She leaned back, pressing a hand over her belly. "What do I do, baby?" she whispered. "If I take it to the police, they'll ask where I found it. They'll think I stole it. If I leave it, someone else will take it. What if this is the only way we make it?" Tears filled her eyes again. She wasn't a thief. She wasn't greedy. She just didn't want to suffer anymore. Her phone lay dead on the nightstand. She didn't have a charger. She didn't have food either. Except for the granola bar she found in her coat pocket. Her stomach growled. She looked at the vending machine outside her window. The glow of it in the rain looked like something holy. She grabbed $2 from her wallet, went outside, and bought a sandwich and a bottle of water. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, she took small bites, whispering, "It's just until I figure it out." The sandwich was stale, but she ate it like it was a feast. Every chew reminded her she was still alive. Every swallow felt like defiance. After eating, she stretched out on the bed and looked at the ceiling. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "I'll decide tomorrow." Sleep came slowly. A mix of exhaustion and fear wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. Her dreams were strange. Flashes of Daniel's face, Helen's voice, the sound of the rain, and the sight of the bag glowing under the bench like a trap. When she woke up, the world was quiet again. Pale morning light spilled through the curtains. Her back ached, her feet were swollen, but her mind felt clearer than it had in days. She sat up, staring at the bag on the floor. The first thing she thought wasn't fear this time. It was possibility. Maybe she could use a little of it. Not all, just enough to start over, to survive. She remembered the baby's heartbeat at the doctor's office. Fast, steady, strong. She remembered how Daniel had smiled that day, saying, "We'll be a family, Em. I promise." That promise was gone now. But the baby wasn't, and that was enough reason to fight. She got up, washed her face in the cracked sink, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her lips pale, but she didn't look defeated anymore. She looked tired, yes, but also determined. She took another $100 bill and tucked the rest deep inside the mattress. Then she grabbed her coat and stepped out into the cold morning air. She walked to the nearest diner, a small place called Sonny's Breakfast Spot. The smell of coffee hit her as soon as she opened the door. A woman behind the counter smiled and said, "Morning, honey. You look like you've had a night." Emily gave a small, tired smile. "You could say that." She ordered scrambled eggs and toast, her first warm meal in days. When the food came, she ate slowly, savoring every bite. Around her, the sound of dishes clinking and quiet chatter made her feel human again. As she sat there, a help-wanted sign caught her eye on the counter. "Dishwasher evening shifts." She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Is that still open?" The waitress nodded. "Sure is. You interested?" Emily hesitated. "Yes, I could start today if you need." The woman smiled. "Well, aren't you a blessing? You can fill out a form after you eat. You got a name, sweetheart?" Emily paused, then said softly, "Emma. Emma Collins." The lie slipped out easily. A name that felt like safety. By the afternoon, she had a job. It wasn't much, but it was honest. She used part of the money to rent a tiny apartment nearby. One room, cracked paint, and a view of the back alley, but it was hers. For the first time in weeks, she had a roof that belonged to her alone. Each day after work, she'd come home exhausted, her hands smelling of soap and dishes, her back aching, but her spirit a little lighter. She made herself small dinners and whispered to her baby before bed. "We're okay now," she'd say. "We're going to make it." On weekends, she'd sit by the window with an old notebook she found at a thrift store. She began writing, not about the money, not about Daniel, but about motherhood, about pain, about starting again when everything feels lost. It became her therapy. Her pages filled quickly, her handwriting messy but alive. She started saving every cent from her job, buying only what she needed. The bag of money stayed hidden, untouched, buried deep under the loose floorboard beneath her bed. Sometimes she'd pull it out just to count it again, reminding herself it was real. Then she'd put it right back, whispering, "Not yet." Weeks passed. Her body grew heavier, her belly rounder. The diner became her routine. She made quiet friends, people who didn't know her story, but smiled when she came in. For the first time in a long time, life felt steady. Not perfect, not easy, but steady. One evening, after a long shift, she came home, showered, and sat by the window, scrolling through a used phone she bought second-hand. The internet connection was slow, but it worked. She wasn't expecting anything. She was just scrolling mindlessly when a message popped up from an old coworker at the hospital where she used to work. "Hey Emily, I'm sorry if this is weird, but I just saw something online. I thought you should know." She opened the message. It was a link. Her hand shook as she tapped it. A photo loaded. Daniel in a tuxedo, smiling, holding Claire's hand. The caption read, "Finally, with the woman he was meant to be with. Love always finds a way." Emily stared at the screen. Her throat went dry. Her chest felt hollow again. The same pain she thought she'd buried came roaring back, sharp and real. But this time, she didn't cry. She just stared long enough for the screen to go dark. She set the phone down gently, took a deep breath, and looked around her small, quiet apartment. It wasn't much, but it was hers, her peace. She rubbed her belly again and whispered, "Let them have each other. We'll have something better." Her voice didn't shake this time. Outside, the night was calm. The city humming softly below her window. She didn't know it yet. But this calm would soon be broken. Because life has a way of testing you right when you start to heal. And Emily Parker, or Emma Collins, was about to face the past she thought she'd left behind. Days slipped into weeks. The air grew colder, and the smell of pumpkin pie and wet leaves filled the town. Emily, still calling herself Emma, had fallen into a rhythm. Mornings were quiet, evenings were long, and nights were peaceful enough that she could finally sleep without crying. She woke early each day, the same routine. She made oatmeal with a drizzle of honey, tied her hair in a bun, and walked to the diner with her coat buttoned tight. The other waitresses smiled at her now. The cook, a gruff man named Mike, always saved her the first cup of coffee. They didn't know her past, and she didn't volunteer it. To them, she was just Emma, the quiet girl with kind eyes who worked hard and never complained. Sometimes, between scrubbing plates and wiping down tables, she'd look out the diner window and imagine what her old life used to look like. Fancy dinners, cars with leather seats, expensive perfumes. Then she'd look down at her calloused hands, the small scar on her finger from washing dishes, and realize she didn't miss it anymore, that life had been a cage dressed as comfort. This one was humble but free. Each night after work, she'd come home to her little apartment. The floor creaked, the heater hissed, but she loved it anyway. She'd sit by the window, write a few lines in her notebook, and whisper to her unborn baby. "We're getting stronger every day," she'd say softly. "You'll be proud of me, won't you?" She even started saving tips in a small jar labeled Hope Fund. Watching the bills pile up inside made her feel like she was building something from nothing. But no matter how far she tried to move on, Daniel's shadow still lingered somewhere in her chest. Every now and then, she'd catch herself wondering if he was happy, if he thought of her, or if he ever regretted anything. She hated that she still cared. One Friday night, after the dinner rush, she stayed late to clean. The radio played a soft country song. The lights were dim. She moved from table to table with her rag, wiping slowly, lost in thought. Mike stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "You're still here, Emma." "Just finishing up," she said with a small smile. He nodded. "You work too hard. Go home, kid." "I like it quiet," she said. "Makes me think." He grunted and disappeared back into the kitchen. Emily looked around the empty diner. The reflections of neon lights from across the street shimmered on the windows. She wiped the last table, humming softly. When the doorbell jingled, "Sorry," She called automatically, not looking up. "We're closed for the night." No one answered. She turned her head and her heart skipped. Standing at the door, dripping wet from the rain, was Helen Parker. The older woman's presence sucked the air out of the room. Her once perfect hair was undone, strands sticking to her face. She wasn't wearing her usual pearls or designer coat, just a black trench, wrinkled and heavy from the rain. Her eyes looked darker, older, almost desperate. Emily froze, the rag still in her hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Helen looked at her like she was seeing a ghost. "Emily," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. The name hit her like a slap. No one had called her that in months. She had buried Emily Parker the day she found that bag. She straightened slowly. "You must be mistaken," she said, her voice calm but tight. "My name's Emma." Helen took a step closer, her heels clicking weakly against the tiled floor. "Don't do that, please. I know it's you." Emily's pulse quickened. She felt her baby move slightly inside her, as if sensing the tension. "What do you want, Helen?" she asked, her voice sharp now. Helen opened her mouth, but for a second, no words came. She looked exhausted, her skin pale, her eyes red from crying. I didn't know where else to go," she whispered finally. Emily blinked, confused. "To go? What do you mean?" Helen's fingers twisted together. "It's Daniel," she said, her voice breaking on his name. He's gone." The words hung in the air like smoke. Emily stared at her, her breath caught in her chest. "Gone." Helen took another shaky step forward, lowering her voice as if confessing something to the walls. "He disappeared 2 nights ago. They found his car near the river, but he wasn't in it. No note, no phone, nothing. The police think he—" her voice cracked. "They think he might have done something to himself." Emily said nothing. She couldn't. The woman who once threw her out of her home now stood there trembling, looking smaller than she'd ever seen before. "I didn't know who else to call," Helen whispered. "He loved you once, Emily. Maybe you're the only one who can help us find him." Emily felt her throat tighten. The baby kicked again, hard this time. She pressed her hand to her belly, trying to steady herself. Daniel missing? 1,000 thoughts collided in her mind. Grief, anger, disbelief, a strange guilt she couldn't name. After everything he had done, after the lies, after throwing her out, now he was gone. She looked at Helen, who was still trembling by the door. For a moment, all Emily saw was the woman who'd watched her cry and done nothing. The one who'd closed the door in her face. Now she was the one standing in the rain begging. Life had a way of coming full circle. Emily finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Why are you here, Helen?" Helen swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "Because we need your help." Emily's fingers tightened around the rag in her hand. She felt her heart start to race again. The baby moved once more as if listening. Helen's voice trembled. "Please, Emily, I'm begging you. Daniel's gone." Emily stared at her for a long, silent moment. The rain outside hit the windows in slow, rhythmic taps. She didn't answer. Not yet. Her mind flashed with memories. Daniel laughing with Claire? Helen's voice saying, "We'll send your things later." The hurt came rushing back all at once. But this time, something else stirred beneath it. Something colder, sharper. She placed the rag on the counter, lifted her chin, and met Helen's eyes. "What exactly do you need my help with?" Helen opened her mouth, her voice breaking apart between words. "To bring him home." Emily felt her pulse in her ears. The old world and the new one crashing together inside her chest. The rain outside grew louder. A gust of wind rattled the door. And then, with a voice that trembled just enough to sound human again, Helen whispered the words that would pull Emily back into the past she'd fought so hard to escape. "Emily, Daniel's gone. We need your help for a long time." Neither woman moved. The rain had eased outside, but the silence inside the diner was heavier than before. Emily stood behind the counter, still holding the rag, her knuckles white. Helen stood by the door, trembling, her black coat dripping water. "You threw me out. Remember?" Helen's mouth opened, but no words came. "You told me I was the mistake Daniel wouldn't admit," Emily continued. "You watched me beg for help while I was pregnant. And you didn't blink. Why now?" Helen's eyes welled up. "Because he's my son," she whispered. "And I think he's in trouble." Emily almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He's always been in trouble, Helen. He just made sure everyone else paid for it." Helen flinched. "Please, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I thought you should know. They said he was seen 2 days ago near the old construction site." Then nothing. Emily's stomach tightened. "And Claire?" Helen's lips pressed together. "Gone. Took what was left in his accounts and vanished. No one's seen her since." Emily's eyes flickered with something. Pity, maybe, or disbelief. "You mean she did to him what he did to me?" Helen said nothing. She looked down at her shoes, water still pooling around them. "I'm sorry," Emily said, though her voice didn't sound sorry at all. "But I can't help him. He made his choices." "Please," Helen whispered. "You're the only one who ever really loved him." That hurt more than Emily expected. Because it was true. Once upon a time, she had loved him enough to forgive anything. But that woman didn't exist anymore. "Go home, Helen," she said finally. "There's nothing I can do." Helen hesitated, tears in her eyes. "If you change your mind, I'll be at the house, or what's left of it." Then she turned and left, her heels echoing on the tile until the door shut behind her. Emily stood still for a moment, staring at the empty doorway. Her heart was racing, but her mind felt strangely calm. She wasn't that broken girl anymore, the one who'd stood outside in the rain, begging to be let back in. Still, that night she barely slept. The image of Helen's trembling face haunted her. The words "Daniel's gone" replayed over and over. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she was past it, but a small traitorous part of her still wanted to know the truth. The next few days passed slowly. Emily worked her shifts, forced smiles for customers, and tried not to think about the past. But every time the diner door opened, she caught herself glancing up, half expecting him to walk in. Then one evening it happened. It was almost closing time. The rain had started again, steady and cold. Emily was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door jingled. "Sorry," she said without looking up. Her voice cut off. Daniel Parker stood there. For a second, her brain refused to believe it. He looked different. His sharp suit was gone, replaced by a wrinkled shirt and a jacket that hung too loose on his frame. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale, his jaw rough with stubble. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Emily," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. The sound of it made something inside her twist, but not in the way it used to. She set the rag down and crossed her arms. "You shouldn't be here," she stated. He gave a small, tired laugh. "You changed your number. I had to find you somehow." "I changed my life," she said evenly. "That's not an invitation." He took a step closer. "Please, Em, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." She didn't answer right away. He looked so lost, so broken, that some old instinct, the one that used to want to fix him, stirred in her chest. But she pushed it down. 5 minutes, she said finally. Then you leave. He nodded and sank into a booth, his hands shaking slightly as he rubbed them together for warmth. She didn't sit. She just stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching him. He looked around the diner like he was trying to understand her world. So, this is where you've been? He asked quietly. Yes. He nodded slowly. You look different, stronger. Being thrown out in the rain will do that to you, she said. He winced. I know. I'm sorry for that. No, you're sorry you're here, she said flatly. Get to the point, Daniel. Why are you looking for me? He hesitated. His eyes dropped to the table. Everything fell apart, Em. The company's gone. The deal's crashed. The investors, she cut him off. The ones you cheated. His head snapped up. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me, she said calmly. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. Claire took everything. Money, documents, contacts. She vanished. The cops think I helped her, but I didn't. She used me. I swear. Emily raised an eyebrow. She used you? You mean the way you used me? He flinched again, but kept talking. That money, what she took. It wasn't hers. It was company money. I was supposed to invest it. Instead, she stole it and disappeared the night everything went down. That's why I was at the construction site the night your mother saw me. I was trying to find her. Emily's stomach turned cold. Her hands clenched against her sides. What money? Daniel leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. 5 million cash. It was meant for the investors. She must have panicked and dumped it somewhere before she skipped town. The words hit Emily like a slow-moving wave. 5 million dumped somewhere. Her mind flashed back to that night at the bus stop. The rain, the lightning, the black duffel bag. It couldn't be. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. And you never found it? He shook his head. No, the police think she fled with it, but I know her. She's not smart enough to pull this off. Someone must have found it. Her heart pounded, but she forced her face to stay calm. Maybe you should let it go. I can't, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. That money wasn't mine, Em. If I don't return it, I go to prison. She felt dizzy, a quiet panic crawling up her spine. The money is his. All this time. Daniel looked up at her again, his eyes pleading. I need help, Em. I don't have anyone else. Emily's voice came out steady, though her heart was racing. You have a mother. Ask her. She's broke, he snapped. You think I'd be here if she could fix it? He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. You've been doing well, haven't you? Got yourself a new life, new place, new job. You could lend me something just to get back on my feet. I'll pay you back. I promise. Emily felt something inside her harden. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't even anger. It was recognition. He hadn't changed. He still believed the world and she owed him something. Let me get this straight, she said softly. You left me pregnant, homeless, and alone. You married the woman you cheated with. And now you want me to save you. He tried to smile, but it came out twisted. It's not like that. She tilted her head. Then what's it like, Daniel? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. His eyes flickered, the mask slipping for just a second. You always were self-righteous, he muttered, acting like you're better than everyone. She didn't flinch. No, I just learned to stop bleeding for people who never cared when I was bleeding. For a moment, silence filled the diner. The rain outside tapped softly against the glass, steady and unbothered. Daniel stared at her like he didn't recognize her anymore. Maybe he didn't. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor, his jaw tightened. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "You think you're free, but you're not. You'll see." Emily didn't move. She just looked at him, her face calm, her voice low. "Good night, Daniel." He hesitated for half a second, then turned and walked out into the rain, the door slamming behind him. Emily stood there alone, staring at the door, the sound of his footsteps fading away. Her hands trembled, but she didn't cry. She just stood there, breathing, letting the quiet sink in. When the door slammed, the sound echoed through the empty diner like thunder after a storm. Emily didn't move. She stood there for a long moment, her hands resting on the counter, her breath shallow. The rain outside blurred everything beyond the glass, turning the world into streaks of gray and gold from the street lights. The faint scent of coffee still lingered in the air, mixed with the sharp trace of Daniel's cologne, the one he used to wear when he kissed her neck before work. Now it only made her stomach turn. She picked up the rag from the counter and began wiping the same spot she'd been cleaning before he walked in. Her fingers trembled, but she kept moving, her body on autopilot. Mike stepped out from the kitchen, frowning. "Everything okay out here?" "I heard voices." Emily looked up, forcing her face to relax. "It's fine," she said softly. "Just a customer who got the wrong place." He studied her for a second, then nodded slowly. "All right, if you say so. You locking up soon?" "Yeah, just finishing up." When he disappeared again, she sank into one of the booths and buried her face in her hands. She didn't cry. The tears were gone, wrung dry by too many nights of pain. But her heart was pounding, her mind racing. The bag of money, the one hidden under the floorboard at her apartment, suddenly felt heavier than ever. His words replayed in her head like an echo. That money wasn't hers. It was company money. She must have dumped it somewhere. Her breath came out shaky. Oh God. She had spent months believing that the money was a strange blessing, something the universe had dropped at her feet after tearing her life apart. Now she knew it wasn't chance. It had a name, a history, and it all led back to Daniel Parker. She pressed a hand over her belly. The baby moved softly under her palm, a faint reminder that she couldn't fall apart again. "Don't worry," she whispered. "We're safe. We'll stay quiet. Nobody has to know." But deep down she knew secrets always find their way out. She cleaned the last table, turned off the lights, and walked home through the rain. The streets glistened under street lamps, puddles reflecting flashes of lightning in the distance. The air smelled of wet earth and cold metal. By the time she reached her apartment, her clothes were soaked through. She peeled off her coat, hung it on the back of the door, and leaned against the wall, letting out a long breath. Her eyes drifted toward the corner where the floorboard hid the duffel bag. For a moment she thought about moving it, finding somewhere safer, but her body felt too heavy. Instead, she made tea and sat by the window, staring out at the dark sky. Her thoughts wouldn't stop spinning. Daniel was desperate. He had found her once. He could find her again. And if he ever discovered the truth about that money, everything she had rebuilt could vanish in an instant. She stayed awake most of the night, listening to the rain and the sound of the old radiator hissing in the corner. Around 3 a.m., she drifted into a restless sleep, her dreams full of flashes. Daniel shouting, Claire running, a black bag in the rain. When morning came, the sunlight felt harsh, unforgiving. She woke up with a dull ache in her back and the taste of fear still in her mouth. She went through the motions: shower, breakfast, the same old gray sweater, but her hands shook as she poured her tea. The TV on her kitchen counter flickered with static before settling on the morning news. The anchor's voice was calm, professional, almost too normal for what she was about to say. In other news, the woman began. Local businessman Daniel Parker, CEO of Parker and Holt Developments, has been arrested on charges of corporate fraud and embezzlement. Emily froze her teacup halfway to her lips. The reporter's voice continued. Authorities confirmed Parker's arrest early this morning. Sources claim millions of dollars are still unaccounted for, believed to be tied to a failed real estate deal earlier this year. Parker is expected to face a lengthy investigation. A photo of Daniel appeared on the screen, his mug shot. No suit, no smile, no charm, just hollow eyes and a face that looked older than his years. Emily's heart thudded painfully in her chest. The cup in her hand shook. Tea spilled onto the counter, but she didn't notice. She couldn't look away from the screen. The reporter moved on to another story, but her words faded into static in Emily's ears. The world had gone silent, except for the sound of her own breathing. He'd been arrested. After everything, after his arrogance, his cruelty, his betrayal, Daniel Parker had finally fallen. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at the dark TV screen. The reflection of her face looked different somehow. Not scared, not even shocked, just still. She pressed her palm gently against her belly, feeling the faint movement inside. Her voice came out quiet, steady. "It's over," she whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." But part of her knew it wasn't over yet. The past never disappears that easily. It waits. It circles. Finds new ways to return. Emily turned off the TV and stood by the window watching the world wake up outside. People walking dogs. Kids running to school. Cars passing by. Life kept going even when your world stopped. She reached for her phone, her hand hovering over it for a second. 100 thoughts crossed her mind, calling Helen, checking the news again, hiding the money somewhere else. Instead, she put the phone down. She didn't owe anyone a thing. Still, as she stood there, the faint sound of sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. They were moving fast, getting closer. She tried to tell herself it was just a coincidence, but her heart started to race anyway. She looked toward the floorboard again, where the secret of her survival and Daniel's downfall was hidden. The sirens grew louder. Emily closed her eyes, her jaw tightening. "Please," she whispered to herself. "Not yet." And then the sound passed, fading down another street, leaving only the hum of morning behind. She exhaled shakily, pressing a hand over her heart. For now, she was safe. But deep down, she could feel it. The truth was coming home. And this time, there'd be nowhere left to hide. The months after Daniel's arrest passed slowly, like a long winter thawing into spring. The world had finally stopped spinning around him. There were no more messages, no more calls, no more ghosts from the life she'd left behind. For the first time in years, Emily Parker, or Emma Collins, as the town knew her, was free to breathe without fear. She no longer checked the news for updates about the Parker family, though sometimes she'd catch glimpses of headlines at the diner. Local businessman faces 20 years. Fraud scandal expands. Former CEO denies charges. She'd glance once, then turn the page. That story wasn't hers anymore. Her days settled into rhythm. Quiet mornings, gentle music, the soft weight of pregnancy pressing down on her ribs, but lifting her heart. Each kick from the baby reminded her that love could be born from pain, that something good could come from everything that went wrong. When the time finally came, she gave birth in the small town hospital where she'd started volunteering. The delivery was long and painful, but when she heard the first cry, every scar inside her seemed to loosen. The nurse placed the tiny baby boy in her arms. He was pink and wrinkled with a patch of dark hair and a small, determined frown, just like Daniel's, but softer somehow. Emily's tears came without shame. She held him close, whispering, "You're my new beginning." She named him Hope. The doctor said she could leave in 2 days. The nurses adored her, calling her the calmest new mother they'd ever seen. No one knew that calmness came from surviving storms that could have destroyed her. Back in her apartment, the world felt smaller but brighter. Every sound, every breath from her baby was a promise that she'd never go back to who she was before. She spent nights sitting by the window, rocking Hope to sleep and whispering little dreams to him. "You'll never have to earn love, my sweet boy," she'd murmur. "You'll just have it." But even peace can't sit still for long. 2 months after Hope's birth, Emily began feeling restless. She had money tucked away, more than she'd ever dared to use. For a while, it had felt like a burden. Now it started to feel like a responsibility. She couldn't give it back. Not without questions that would ruin everything. But she couldn't keep it buried forever either. It wasn't meant to rot in the floorboards. One quiet afternoon, while Hope napped, she opened her old journal. The one filled with late-night scribbles about pain and starting over. As she flipped through it, she realized something. Almost every page was written to women like her. Women who'd been abandoned, used, or forgotten. She closed the book and whispered to herself, "Then that's where it should go." By summer, Emily had rented a small storefront on the edge of town, an old bakery with cracked windows and faded blue paint. With a bit of repair and care, it became her dream, a small support center for single mothers. She named it the Haven. The first time she opened the doors, she stood in the empty space, holding Hope in one arm and looking at the fresh sign over the door. The letters weren't fancy, but they were hers. Inside, she'd painted the walls a soft cream and added second-hand furniture, worn but warm. A bookshelf stood by the window filled with parenting books and hand-me-down toys. A coffee pot simmered in the corner, the smell of vanilla filling the air. She posted a simple message on the community board, "The Haven, a place for women starting again. No judgment, no cost, just help, ****. The first week only 2 women came. Both were scared, quiet, unsure whether to trust her. Emily didn't press them. She just listened and made tea. By the 3rd week, more came. Some with babies, some still pregnant. Some with eyes that looked exactly like hers had once looked, hollow, but hungry for hope. The Haven grew slowly, one story at a time. Emily used part of the hidden money to keep it running. Rent, supplies, food. No one questioned where it came from. They just saw kindness and called it generosity. By fall, the small space had become a refuge. Laughter returned to walls that had once echoed only with pain. Women shared meals, stories, and dreams they'd buried for too long. And every evening after the last visitor left, Emily would walk through the quiet room, picking up stray toys and whispering a prayer of gratitude. Her pain had turned into purpose. One rainy afternoon, as she was sorting donated clothes, a shadow fell across the doorway. She turned and froze. Helen Parker stood there. The older woman looked smaller now, thinner. Her hair streaked with more gray than before. Her elegant posture had collapsed into something fragile. She held her purse tightly against her chest like armor. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Emily's first instinct was to close the door. But something in Helen's face stopped her, something she'd never seen before: humility. "Hello, Emily," Helen said softly, Her voice had lost its edge. Emily took a slow breath. "What are you doing here?" Helen stepped closer, her heels clicking faintly on the floor. "I wasn't sure if I should come, but I had to see you." Emily crossed her arms. "Why?" Helen looked around the room at the warm lights, the toys, the photos on the wall. Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I wanted to say I was wrong." The words hit the air like something heavy dropping. Helen continued, voice trembling. "I thought money made us better. I thought pride made us strong. But all it did was make us cruel. When Daniel went to prison, I realized what I'd built my whole life on. I'm sorry, Emily, for all of it." For a moment, Emily said nothing. She could still remember every cruel word Helen had said. Every moment she'd been made to feel small. The memory of that rainy night still lived in her bones. But she could also see the truth in front of her. A broken woman trying to find her way back to grace. Emily exhaled slowly. "You were right about one thing," she said quietly. Helen blinked, startled. "I didn't belong in your world," Emily continued. "But I found mine." Helen's lip trembled. "You did," she whispered. "You really did." Emily nodded once, her eyes calm. "Take care of yourself, Helen." Then she walked her gently to the door, held it open and watched as the woman who had once thrown her out walked into the rain alone. When the door shut, Emily leaned her forehead against it for a moment, letting the silence settle. She didn't feel anger anymore, not even sadness, just release. For the first time, forgiveness didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. After Helen left, the rain kept falling softly against the windows of the haven. Emily stood in the quiet, breathing deeply. The smell of rain and old coffee filled the air. The kind of smell that always reminded her of change. That mix of old and new, loss and beginning. She looked around the small room she'd built from nothing. The chairs, the toys, the baby blankets folded neatly on the shelves. Every piece of it carried a story, hers, and all the women who had walked through those doors carrying their own storms. She smiled faintly. "We're doing okay," she whispered. The next morning, the sun came through the clouds, warm and golden, stretching across the town like a promise. She opened the curtains, letting the light fill the space. Hope, her baby boy, was already awake, cooing softly from his cradle. She lifted him and pressed her lips against his tiny forehead. His skin was warm, his heart beat small but strong. "Good morning, my sunshine," she said softly. "You know what? Today's a good day." As she fed him, the news played quietly on the small radio by the window. A calm voice read, ****, internal authorities have confirmed the arrest of Claire Reynolds in Madrid. ***, the former partner of disgraced businessman Daniel Parker faces charges of financial fraud and identity theft after attempting to flee the country under a false name." Emily's hands stilled. She looked at her baby, then at the radio. "Claire," the voice continued, "Reynolds is expected to be extradited to the United States. Sources say the arrest brings closure to one of the most significant corporate fraud cases in recent years." Emily turned off the radio. She sat quietly for a moment, her heart both heavy and light. Closure. That word used to mean revenge. Now it meant peace. Claire had taken everything Daniel gave her, his trust, his empire, his illusion of power, and destroyed it. Karma had finished the job Emily never started. And Daniel, he was still serving his sentence. The world had forgotten him. But Emily hadn't forgotten what she'd learned. She looked at her son again. "See, Hope, sometimes the world fixes itself," she whispered. "You don't always have to fight. You just have to outlive the pain." That afternoon, she took him with her to the haven. The women were already there. A small group sitting in a circle, sipping tea, laughing softly, babies gurgling in their laps. When Emily walked in, they greeted her with smiles. To them, she wasn't some tragic woman with a dark past. She was their strength, the one who had built something out of brokenness. She sat with them, listening as one young mother named Lily shared her story. A story so familiar it made Emily's throat tighten, abandoned at 6 months pregnant, rejected by family, trying to survive on her own. Lily wiped her eyes and said, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel normal again." Emily smiled gently. "You don't need to feel normal," she said softly. "You just need to feel you, the woman who's still here, still breathing, still trying." Lily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "How did you make it through?" she asked, her voice small, almost afraid. The room fell quiet. Everyone looked at Emily. She leaned back in her chair, rocking hope in her arms, her eyes glistening but steady. The golden afternoon light fell across her face, soft and full of grace. "I stopped asking why they left," she said quietly, "and started thanking God that they did." A hush filled the room. Somewhere, one of the babies giggled, a small, perfect sound that broke the stillness like sunlight through clouds. Emily smiled wider, her eyes on her son. "If they hadn't left," she continued, her voice calm and warm, "I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have him. I wouldn't have any of this. Sometimes the people who break you are the ones who free you." Lily's shoulders relaxed. The women nodded slowly, the words sinking into their hearts like seeds. For the first time, Emily realized she wasn't just helping them, she was healing, too. Each story they told mended a little more of her own. After the group left, she stayed behind to clean up. Hope had fallen asleep in his carrier, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm. She looked down at him and whispered, "You're my reason, my second chance." She turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying the smell of wet earth and jasmine. The town was quiet, except for the distant hum of cars and the soft rustle of trees. Across the street, the setting sun painted everything gold. Emily stood for a while, just watching, holding her baby close. She thought of her old life, of the mansion with cold marble floors, the empty smiles, the heavy silence between her and Daniel. She thought of that night in the rain, the duffel bag at her feet, and how her hands had trembled when she picked it up. Back then, she thought she'd found luck. Now she knew she'd found something better, a second chance. She whispered to the wind, "Thank you." As she walked home, her phone buzzed with a message from one of the women at the Haven. "Thank you for today, Miss Emma. I didn't think I'd ever smile again." Emily smiled, slipping the phone into her pocket. Her steps felt light. Her heart was still scarred, yes, but it no longer hurt. It only reminded her how far she'd come. When she reached her apartment, she laid Hope in his crib and stood watching him for a while. The little nightlight glowed softly against the wall. He looked peaceful, his tiny hand resting against his cheek. Emily brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Sleep well, my little miracle," she whispered. "You'll grow up knowing that pain doesn't have to break you." She sat by the window, her gaze drifting toward the dark horizon. The same city that had once thrown her out now held her dreams. Somewhere beyond those streets, her past had burned away, and from its ashes she had built her peace. Outside, a breeze stirred the curtains. The faint smell of rain still lingered in the air. Emily closed her eyes, leaning her head against the glass. For the first time in a long time, her mind was still. Just peace, no more fear, no more ghosts, just gratitude. The clock ticked softly. The baby sighed in his sleep. Emily whispered one last time, her voice tender and sure, Sometimes the hardest endings bring the best beginnings. The camera of life would fade out right there. A quiet woman holding her peace, her child, and the life she built with her own hands. The woman who once sat broken in the rain had become the light others followed out of their darkness. And when tomorrow came, she would open the haven's doors again, smile at the next lost soul who walked in, and say with gentle certainty, "We're not broken. We're just beginning."